Good afternoon. Before we proceed, and in the spirit of reconciliation, Amplia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia. We pay our respects to their elders and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to welcome you to the annual general meeting of Amplia Therapeutics Limited, which, as a result of COVID-19 restrictions, is being held on a virtual basis and as interactive as possible. Despite these unusual times, a quorum is present, and I declare the meeting open. My name is Warwick Tong, and I am the chair of the company. I would like to introduce my fellow directors who are on the call. Our Managing Director and CEO, Dr. John Lambert, Dr. Robert Peach, Dr. Christopher Burns, and Mrs. Jane Bell, who was appointed a director of the board by the board on the 12th of April 2021. I would also like to note the following members of our senior team who are on the call today: Dr. Mark Devlin, our Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Rhiannon Jones, our Director of Operations, Mr. Jeff Carter, our Chief Financial Officer, and Mr. Andrew Cook, our Company Secretary. I will now proceed with the formal business of today's meeting and can confirm that the notice of meeting was sent by mail to all members of the company in accordance with statutory requirements. I will take the notice of meeting as having been read. Computershare is our share registry provider, represented today by Ms. Gemma Coyle as returning officer. Voting at today's meeting will be conducted via an online platform. For those entitled to vote at today's meeting, if you have not already done so, please log in to the online voting portal as set out in the notice of meeting. As previously notified, voting on all resolutions today will be conducted by way of a poll. In order to provide you with enough time to vote, I will shortly open voting for all resolutions. At that time, if you are eligible to vote at this meeting, a new polling icon will appear on the online voting platform. Selecting this icon will bring up a list of resolutions and present you with voting options. To cast your vote, simply select one of the options. There is no need to hit a submit or enter button, as the vote is automatically recorded. You have the ability to cast and change your vote on all resolutions up until the time I declare voting closed. Following confirmation by Computershare, the final results of this meeting will be announced to the ASX later today. I confirm that 101 proxies representing 49.6 million shares, being 40% of the total issued capital of the company, were received when proxies closed at midday on Wednesday. The proxy details will also be presented today prior to each resolution on the screen where you are viewing these meetings proceedings. As chair, all open proxies appointing me as proxy will be cast in favour of the resolutions. The notice of meeting requested shareholders submit questions by email by not later than 5 p.m. on Friday, 20 August 2021. I can confirm that the company has not received any questions from shareholders in respect of the resolutions to be considered at today's meeting. We will also entertain questions from shareholders attending today's Zoom meeting via Zoom, provided that they relate to the resolutions to be considered at today's meeting. If you have any questions, please use the chat function in Zoom, which will be monitored by our Company Secretary, Mr. Andrew Cook. Please include in the chat your name, the resolution that your question relates to, and a summary of your question. Where the question is appropriate, Mr. Cook will notify me as we come to each resolution, and you will be unmuted so that you may ask your question. Before we proceed with the more formal part of the meeting, I would like to call on Dr. John Lambert, as our Managing Director and CEO, to comment on some of the company's achievements over the past 12 months. John's presentation was released to the market as an ASX announcement prior to the commencement of this meeting. John, please present to the meeting.
Thank you, Warwick, and welcome everyone to this year's annual general meeting. Could I mention also before I proceed that today happens to be Daffodil Day here in Australia, so please consider making a donation to the Cancer Council if you're able to. The year just gone has been a really exciting one for Amplia, and one in which we've achieved a lot, despite the difficulties that have been faced by all of us since the beginning of 2020. What I'd like to do today is provide you with a short presentation that I hope both reacquaints you with our story and our recent achievements, but also tells you about the exciting future that's immediately ahead of us. Please take note of our disclaimer. So because this is an annual general meeting, I expect that most of our audience is probably quite familiar with our technology. However, just as a reminder, Amplia is developing drugs that inhibit a target called focal adhesion kinase, or FAK. We recently completed the company's first clinical study, a phase 1 clinical trial in healthy volunteers, and the data from that study has now built a solid platform for future development of AMP945 in multiple indications. I think the even more exciting news is that we're now on the brink of 2 phase 2 clinical studies, respectively in pancreatic cancer and pulmonary fibrosis. So FAK plays an important role in the establishment and maintenance of cancer and in a number of fibrotic diseases. In fibrosis, we expect that our FAK inhibitors will most likely be used clinically as single-agent antifibrotic agents. But in cancer, we expect that these FAK inhibitors will need to be used as combination therapies alongside other existing chemotherapies, in particular in cancers where fibrosis plays a role, such as in pancreatic and ovarian cancers. So, our scientific expectation that our FAK inhibitors may have utility in fibrosis and cancer is borne out by nonclinical data that we've generated in multiple disease models. On the left-hand side of this slide, I'm showing you some of the most pertinent data that tells us that AMP945 is a potent antifibrotic agent. In this experiment, AMP945 reduced lung fibrosis in the industry standard bleomycin model of that disease. On the right-hand side of the slide, I'm showing data that we more recently reported, which tells us that in a particularly aggressive animal model of pancreatic cancer, AMP945 improved the efficacy of gemcitabine and Abraxane, which is a clinical standard of care for patients with advanced pancreatic cancer. So these data, together with all the other things we know about AMP945, tell us that AMP945 deserves to be tested in the clinic and provides a rationale for the clinical trials that we're planning today. The 2 indications that we're most focused on at present are idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is a devastating progressive lung disease. The disease is characterized by a steady decline in lung function over time, and there are relatively few, rather poor treatment options at present. This fibrotic disease and other forms of fibrosis are areas of intense interest for major pharma companies at the moment. We're also focused on pancreatic cancer, which is a really dangerous form of cancer with very limited treatment options at present. Patients with metastatic disease who are treated with the best available therapies we have today have a median time of survival of around about 6 to 8 months. Amplia also holds orphan drug designations from the FDA for both these indications. If we describe what Amplia is doing as a pipeline diagram, we can see that our most advanced clinical development candidate, AMP945, has completed a phase 1 trial and is close to moving into phase 2 clinical trials in both pancreatic cancer and pulmonary fibrosis. And while the focus on phase 2 clinical trials is really the headline for Amplia at the moment, we're also looking at the utility of AMP945 in other oncology indications, in large part through our collaboration with the Garvan Institute in Sydney, but also through other channels. In addition to this, we're exploring the utility of our other FAC inhibitor, AMP886, in both cancers and fibrotic diseases, where 886's unique selectivity profile may provide an advantage over other drugs that are currently in development. So we come to the last year in review. The year just gone has been an enormously successful one for Amplia. In the last 12 months, we're really proud to be able to say that we've transformed our company from being a preclinical stage company to one that's both completed its first clinical trial and is now on the brink of starting phase 2 clinical trials in 2 therapeutic indications. 12 months from now, we expect to be recruiting patients into 2 phase 2 clinical trials, respectively in cancer and pulmonary fibrosis. And if we achieve that goal, it'll be the culmination of our strategic approach to development of AMP945, where we've used a phase 1 trial in healthy volunteers to open doors in both these therapeutic areas. Some of the main achievements for the year are listed on this slide, but I'd specifically like to thank both our numerous individual investors as well as our institutional investors, Platinum, Blue Flag, and more recently Acorn Capital. The support from you all has been fantastic during this year and made the achievements that we're talking about today possible. If you look at the last year as a timeline, it's been a pretty steady flow of events, both including and in addition to the successful phase 1 clinical trial. During the year, we've told you about several promising lines of preclinical studies which both strengthen and expand the case for our FAC inhibitors having potential utility in a range of indications. We also formalised our relationship with the Garvan Institute, and that partnership is already delivering results. We were also fortunate to engage Mrs. Jane Bell as a new non-executive director, and Jane's extensive corporate and legal experience is already providing fresh new perspectives to the board and I. Just to remind you of the outcome of the company's phase 1 clinical trial, we found that AMP945 was safe and well tolerated at all the doses we tested. There were no serious adverse events or withdrawals from the study, and we were unable to identify any negative safety trends in the data. We tested single doses and multiple doses of AMP945, and the pharmacokinetics of orally delivered AMP945 appears to support a convenient once-a-day dosing schedule. We also achieved blood levels of AMP945 that we expect will inhibit the target FAC. So all in all, this trial provided the company with the solid platform we had hoped for further development of AMP945 in multiple indications. Looking forward, this is a timeline that shows a high-level view of some key events and where we expect to be about a year from now. We're currently planning regulatory submissions that are required before we can conduct the pancreatic cancer trial. And once these are done, we will be able to recruit patients into that trial, we expect, starting from the first quarter of 2022. Because of the need for an extended duration of dosing in the pulmonary fibrosis trial, we'll need to complete some extended toxicology studies before we can start a phase 2 trial in pulmonary fibrosis patients. As such, the start of the pulmonary fibrosis trial is expected to be about 6 months behind the start of the pancreatic cancer trial. So in summary, the last year's been a really successful one for our company, and I expect that the coming 12 months will be even more rewarding. Over the next few quarters, we expect to share news with you about our progress on a number of fronts. And my own and our management team's crusade on shareholders' behalf is going to be to push our company onward into phase 2 clinical studies. Most of the items listed on this slide are the key milestones whose achievement will be indicators of our progress on the road to conducting the phase 2 trial in pancreatic cancer. And we'll keep you informed about developments on these and other fronts. Just to wrap up, I'd like to do so by thanking my colleagues, Mark Devlin, our Chief Scientific Officer, and Rhiannon Jones, our Director of Operations, Jeff Carter and Andrew Cook for their unwavering support throughout the year. Thanks also to Amplia's board for their support, guidance and counsel during the year. And most importantly, again, thank you to all our shareholders, large and small. Your support as we grow our company and navigate Amplia's assets through clinical development is really very much appreciated. Thank you for your attention. And now I'd like to hand back to Warwick Tong.
Thank you, John. And thank you for a great presentation and overview of the achievements and the future aims of the company going forward. And also thank you for your excellent leadership and management of the company over the past year, along with your team. It's very much appreciated. So the first item of notified business is the tabling of the company's financial statements for the first 12 months ended 31st of March 2021, as well as the director's report and the auditor's report. Under the Corporations Act, this is not a matter that is subject to a vote. The financial statements were provided to all shareholders with the materials related to this meeting. I also note that Mr. Tim Jackman, who is our auditor from Grant Thornton, is on this call and has made himself available in the lead up to today's meeting to address any questions that may have arisen from shareholders in relation to the financial statements. I confirm that the company has not received any questions in respect to the financial statements or the conduct of the audit. Andrew, are there any questions on the financial statements?
Thanks, Warwick. There are no questions from people attending today in relation to the financial statements.
Thank you, Andrew. In that case, I will move on to the next item of business. Before proceeding with resolution 2, I now declare voting open for all resolutions. So again, just a reminder that you should look for the icon that allows you to do that. So resolution 2 is the remuneration report for the year ended 31st of March 2021. This report sets out the policy on remuneration of the directors and the specified executives of the company. I note that there is a voting exclusion in respect of this resolution, and accordingly, the company will disregard any votes cast on this resolution by key management personnel of the company, as defined in the Corporations Act. I put the motion that the remuneration report for the year ended 31st March 2021 be approved. The proxy details are now showing on your screen if you are viewing this meeting online. Are there any questions in relation to the remuneration report, Andrew?
No questions on this resolution, Warwick.
Thank you, Andrew. In that case, please cast your vote and I will move on to the next item of business. Resolution 3, the third item of business on the notice of meeting, deals with the election of Mrs. Jane Bell as a director of the company. As I mentioned earlier, Jane was appointed as a director by the board in April of this year. Jane retires as required under the company's constitution and has offered herself for re-election by the shareholders. I put the motion that Mrs. Jane Bell be and is hereby elected as a director. The proxy details are now showing on your screen. Are there any questions in relation to this resolution, Andrew?
Once again, no questions, Warwick.
Thank you, Andrew. In that case, please cast your vote and I will move on to the next item of business. The fourth item of business on the notice of meeting deals with the re-election of Dr. Robert Peach as a director of the company. Robert was appointed as a non-executive director on the 2nd of September 2015 and retires as required under the company's constitution and has offered himself for re-election. I put the motion that Dr. Robert Peach be and is hereby re-elected as a director. The proxy details are now showing on your screen if you are viewing this meeting online. Are there any questions in relation to this resolution, Andrew?
No questions, Warwick.
Thank you, Andrew. In that case, please cast your vote and I will move on to the next item of business. So the fifth item of business deals with the approval of the allotment of 15,695,891 shares on 10 May 2021 as part of a placement which raised $3.8 million. The proceeds from this placement are being used to fund enabling activities for the company's planned phase 2 clinical trials in pancreatic cancer and pulmonary fibrosis, and to provide working capital for the company. The placement was undertaken at an issue price of 23 cents per share. The approval of this allotment is sought under ASX Listing Rule 7.4 to refresh the company's 15% capacity to issue shares in the future if required. I now put Resolution 5 as set out in the notice of meeting to approve the allotment of 15,695,891 shares. The proxy details are now showing on your screen. Are there any questions in relation to this resolution, Andrew?
No questions.
Thank you, Andrew. In that case, please cast your vote and I will move on to the next item of business. The final resolution is a special resolution to authorize the board to issue up to an additional 10% of the issued share capital over the next 12 months in accordance with ASX Listing Rule 7.1A. This further 10% placement capacity is in addition to the company's 15% placement capacity under Listing Rule 7.1. Detailed information about this resolution is set out in the notice of meeting as required by the listing rules. I now put Resolution 6 as a special resolution as set out in the notice of meeting to approve this additional placement capacity under ASX Listing Rule 7.1A. The proxy details are now showing on your screen. And once again, Andrew, are there any questions in relation to this resolution?
I have not received any questions on this resolution either.
Thank you, Andrew. In that case, please cast your vote and I will move on to the next item of business. Please finalize your voting as I will shortly be closing the voting session, but we'll just leave a little time to make sure everybody gets the chance to finalize their voting. As I mentioned earlier, the results of this meeting will be released to the market as an ASX announcement later today, once they have been compiled by Computershare. We haven't received any late messages, Andrew?
No, John. No, Warwick. All under control.
So I now declare voting closed. Ladies and gentlemen, as no other business has been notified in accordance with the company's constitution, that concludes the formal business to be dealt with today. I thank you for participating in this rather unusual AGM and hope that we may be able to revert to a physical meeting in Melbourne next year. Thank you for your attendance. I declare the meeting closed.